She laughed when she confessed. So I handled it like a business deal. The first thing I noticed wasn't the lipstick on her collar. It was the way she said it like a punchline. I hooked up with him. No apology, no trembling hands, no shame. Just a lazy little smile as she swirled ice in a glass that didn't belong to her. My late grandfather's crystal, the kind we only used on holidays. Then she lifted her chin, eyes bright with a dare. So, what are you going to do about it, Miles? That was the moment I knew the marriage had already been over for her. She was only here for the reaction. I didn't give her one. My name is Miles Hart. I'm 36, a data security consultant, and for 9 years I thought I was married to a woman named Naomi who loved the same quiet future I did. Saturday markets, a backyard garden, and a kitchen big enough to host Thanksgiving without elbowing people into the sink. But the woman in front of me that night wasn't Naomi from our wedding photos. This Naomi wore contempt like perfume. I set my keys on the entry table and took one slow breath. Okay, I said. Her smile wobbled as if she'd just stepped on a stair that wasn't there. That's it? She scoffed. You're not even going to ask who? I already know, I said. She blinked. Excuse me? I nodded toward the coffee table where her phone lay face down. A new habit, a defensive one. You stopped leaving it on the charger last winter, I said. You started taking calls in the hallway. You started saying you were recharging your social battery every time I asked where you were going. Naomi's mouth opened, then closed. She tried to find the angle where she was still winning. And for a second, just one, fear flickered behind her eyes. Then she recovered and laughed, too loudly. Oh my God, you've been tracking me. Of course, that's your thing, isn't it? Control. There it was. The word she'd learned recently, the one she used like a shield and a knife at the same time. For months, every conversation had ended at that wall. Why are you home so late? Control. Can you tell me what you spent $300 on at a bar I've never heard of? Control. Can we talk about why you seem gone? Control. And every time, like an idiot, I stepped back. I apologized for wanting clarity in my own marriage. I told myself I was being supportive, modern, emotionally intelligent. But support turned into silence. Silence turned into permission. So when she stood in our living room with that glass and that grin and that confession, she thought she'd finally cornered me. She thought I would explode and prove her narrative correct. Instead, I felt something else. A clean, cold calm. Not numbness. Clarity. How long? I asked. Naomi took a sip like she was tasting victory. Does it matter? It matters to the paperwork, I said. Her eyebrows jumped. Paperwork? I didn't answer. I walked down the hall, past the framed photo of us in Lisbon, past the plant she'd forgotten to water, past the guest room we never used because she said we were not those suburban people. My office door clicked softly behind me. Inside, everything was exactly where I left it. The spare laptop, the fire safe, and the thin black envelope in the top drawer. A file that looked boring from the outside, like tax documents or insurance policies. It wasn't. It was the exit plan. I didn't create it out of vengeance. I created it out of self-respect. 3 months ago, after Naomi accused me of policing her because I asked why she'd come home at 2 a.m., smelling like gin and someone else's cologne, I drove to a cafe downtown and sat across from a woman named Kendra Shaw. Kendra was a family attorney with a spine like steel and a voice like warm sand. Calm, steady, unshakable. She didn't ask for drama. She asked for facts. Has she admitted anything? She said. No, I told her. Then you don't argue, Kendra said. You document. You protect yourself. You prepare. I remember staring at the steam rising from my coffee, thinking how surreal it was to be planning a divorce without knowing for sure if I needed one. Kendra slid a list across the table. Passwords, account statements, property titles, a timeline, and, at the bottom, a simple sentence. Don't negotiate during an emotional storm. So I didn't. I updated my passwords. I copied every shared document. I backed up my personal files to an encrypted drive. I opened a new checking account in my name and rerouted my direct deposit there. Quietly, legally, transparently. I made sure our joint account still had enough to cover bills, not to punish her, to protect myself from the day she decided to burn everything down to find herself. And I arranged something else too. A separation agreement draft, ready to be filed the moment there were clear grounds. Not because I wanted to end us, because I refused to be trapped in confusion. Back in the living room, Naomi waited with a smirk as if my absence was proof I was spiraling. She didn't move from her spot by the window. She looked like she was posing for an audience that wasn't there. I returned with the envelope and set it on the dining table. The sound was small, but in the silence it landed like a gavel. Naomi's eyes dropped to it. "What is that?" she asked, suddenly cautious. "Something you asked for," I said. I opened the envelope and slid the first page toward her. Separation agreement. Draft for review. Her lips parted. She scanned the heading, then the first paragraph, then the spaces for signatures. "What the hell is this?" she whispered. "It's the cleanest version of what happens next," I said. She snapped her head up. "You already wrote this?" "I had it prepared," I said. "Not filed. Prepared." Naomi's expression twisted, trying to turn the moment back into a fight. "You plan to leave me? That's insane. That's betrayal." I almost laughed at the irony, but I didn't. I simply said no. Betrayal is sleeping with someone else and then daring your spouse to react. Her cheeks flushed. "I'm not your spouse," she spat, as if that would protect her from what she'd already said. "You are," I replied. "Legally. For now." Naomi looked down at the paper again, and I watched the realization creep in. This wasn't a screaming match. There would be no theatrics, no mascara-streaked monologue where she became the hero of the story. This was a process. "Who told you to do this?" she demanded. "My future," I said. She scoffed and tried to stand taller. "Fine. You want truth? You can have it." She set the glass down with a clink. "It's Theo, from the climbing gym." There it was, a name that sounded like a character in a book she wanted to be living. "How long?" I asked again. Naomi sighed like I was exhausting. "Since May," she said. "And before you start acting like a saint, this happened because you checked out. The blame arrived right on schedule. You work," she continued, "building speed. You talk about spreadsheets and schedules. You treat life like a project plan. Theo is alive. He surprises me. He actually looks at me. I let her talk. I let her burn through every rehearsed line. Because while she spoke, my mind was steady and simple. Grounds confirmed. When she finally paused, breath sharp, waiting for me to beg or rage, I nodded slowly. "Thank you," I said. Her eyes narrowed. "There you go again." "What is wrong with you? Why do you keep saying that?" "Because you made this easy," I replied. Naomi's face shifted, confusion wrestling with anger. "You're seriously doing this? Over one mistake?" I met her gaze. "It wasn't a mistake," I said. "You didn't trip and fall into a bed. You didn't confess because you were ashamed. You confessed because you wanted to hurt me." Her jaw clenched. "That's not." "It is," I said. "And I'm grateful you said it out loud." Naomi's hands curled into fists. "You're acting like you're above me. Like you're some ice-cold robot." I didn't correct her. Let her believe what she wanted. It didn't change the paperwork. I reached into the envelope and pulled out a second sheet. A simple letter from Kendra's office printed on crisp paper with her contact information in the corner. "All communication about this goes through my attorney," I said, sliding it toward Naomi. "You'll also see a proposed split. It's fair, not generous, not cruel. Fair." Naomi stared, and the silence stretched until her voice came out thin. You're leaving. Tonight? Yes, I said. She glanced toward the hallway as if the house could argue for her. This is your home, too. I know, I said, which is why I won't make a scene. I stood, walked to the coat closet, and pulled out the small overnight bag I'd packed weeks ago. Nothing dramatic, just essentials. Clothes, toiletries, my passport, my backup drive, and the envelope with my personal documents. Naomi saw it and went pale. You planned a bag, she whispered. I planned dignity, I corrected. She stepped forward suddenly, voice rising. You can't just abandon me. You can't. Miles, we have a life. I paused at the front door, hand on the knob. We had a life, I said. You traded it for a thrill. Naomi's eyes filled, not with sorrow at first, but with panic. Wait, she said quickly. We can talk. We can do counseling. You're overreacting. I looked at her carefully. For years, I would have softened at that trembling edge. I would have tried to rescue the marriage the way I rescued everything, with effort, logic, compromise. But something inside me had changed, and it wasn't anger. It was acceptance. I don't negotiate in storms, I said quietly. Then I opened the door and stepped out into the night air. It smelled like rain and wet asphalt. It smelled like my life returning to me. I didn't hear what she did behind the door. A sob. A scream. A crash. It wasn't my house anymore, not emotionally. That first night I stayed at a small hotel near the river. Nothing fancy, but clean, silent, anonymous. I lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling for a long time. Not because I missed her, because I was listening to the absence of tension. There was no sharp sigh from the kitchen, no passive-aggressive clatter of dishes, no quiet contempt in the way she said my name, just silence. And for the first time in years, it didn't feel like punishment. It felt like peace. The next morning, I sent my manager a simple message. Urgent personal situation. Working remote this week. His reply was immediate. Take care of yourself. Use the employee support line if you need it. Professional. No questions. No gossip. It was the kind of respect I hadn't realized I was starving for. Naomi, on the other hand, delivered chaos right on schedule. At 8:14 a.m., she texted, Miles, this is ridiculous. Come home. We need to talk. At 9:02, you cannot do this without discussing it. You're being cruel. At 10:37, who is Kendra? You already hired a lawyer? At noon, I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry. Can we please talk? Then at 2:18 p.m., Theo says you're manipulating me financially. This is abuse. That last one made me exhale slowly, not because it hurt, because it confirmed exactly what Kendra warned me about. When people lose control, they rewrite history. I didn't respond. I forwarded the messages to Kendra and kept my phone on silent. By evening, Naomi tried a different strategy. A mutual friend named Pilar called me. Miles, Pilar said carefully, Naomi's saying you're having some kind of breakdown, that you're paranoid, that you... I have documentation, I said calmly. Silence. What kind? Pilar asked. A signed statement from Naomi confirming the affair, I said. And a timeline. I won't debate it. I won't smear her. I'm just stepping away. Pilar's voice softened. Oh. Then, quieter. I'm sorry. And she hung up. That was the thing about reality. It didn't need to be screamed. It only needed to be consistent. A week later, I moved into a furnished sublet on the other side of town. The place was sterile. White walls, cheap furniture, a view of a parking lot. But it belonged to no one but me. No memories to trip over. I started running again, slow at first, then longer, letting cold air burn out the last stubborn knots in my chest. I ate when I was hungry, not when someone else was performing a mood. I slept, deeply, dreamlessly. Naomi kept trying to pierce the wall of silence. Her mother emailed, Miles, sweetheart, people make mistakes. You took vows. Be the bigger person. I deleted it. A new number texted, "This is Naomi. Please, I can explain." Blocked. An unknown LinkedIn request popped up from Theo. Message, "Hey man, this is weird, but Naomi's really upset. Can you just talk to her?" I stared at it for a full minute, amused by the audacity. Then I clicked, ignore. Theo wasn't a villain in a movie. He was just a man who enjoyed being a fantasy, until the fantasy demanded responsibility. And Naomi was discovering that fantasies don't file paperwork. They don't sign leases. They don't sit with you when you're sobbing on a Tuesday night because your life is falling apart. A month into the process, Kendra called me. "Mediation request came in," she said. "Naomi's attorney is asking for a pause. Claims she's going through personal upheaval." I almost smiled. "Is that code for Theo disappeared?" I asked. Kendra's voice held a hint of dry humor. "Let's just say, the third party is no longer available, and she is seeking stability." Stability, the very thing she called suffocating. We scheduled mediation anyway. On the day of it, I wore a plain navy suit and brought a folder with clean copies of everything. Naomi arrived late, looking smaller than I remembered. No perfectly curled hair, no confident stride, just tired eyes and a hoodie that didn't match her sneakers. When she saw me, she flinched as if she expected me to spit fire. I didn't. I nodded politely. "Naomi," I said. Her lips trembled. "Miles," she whispered. The mediator spoke. The lawyers spoke. Numbers moved from one column to another. Our marriage translated into percentages and lines of text. Naomi cried once, quietly, when the mediator mentioned the house. Not because she missed the home, because she missed the version of herself who thought she could have everything. When it ended, the agreement sat on the table, waiting for signatures. Naomi looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. "You really don't hate me," she said. "No," I replied. That answer hurt her more than hate would have, because hate would mean I was still emotionally tethered to her. Hate would mean she still mattered enough to ignite something. I wasn't tethered. I was done. 2 weeks later, I moved again, this time into a condo with secure entry and sunlight that fell across the floors in the morning like forgiveness. I bought a secondhand motorcycle on a whim, not because I was trying to prove anything, but because I finally could. No one rolling their eyes at my joy. No one calling my hobbies midlife cliches. On Saturdays, I rode north where the roads curved through pine and open sky. Wind roared in my helmet, loud enough to erase old arguments. And slowly, I realized something I didn't expect. I wasn't waiting for Naomi to suffer. I wasn't tracking her social media. I wasn't curious about her new life. I was simply not carrying her anymore. But life has a way of echoing even when you stop listening. One afternoon, about 2 months after I left, I walked into my condo lobby carrying groceries. I saw her before she spoke. Naomi sat in a chair near the far wall, hands clasped too tightly, eyes fixed on the doors like a person waiting for a verdict. When she saw me, she stood quickly. "Miles," she said, voice cracking. "Please, just 5 minutes." The concierge glanced at us, alert but not vmishing. I stopped a few feet away. "What do you want?" I asked. Naomi swallowed. "I want to apologize. For real, Her voice faltered. I was stupid. I was insecure. And he made me feel special. Theo. She didn't say his name, but it hovered there like smoke. "I thought you'd fight for me," she whispered. "And when you didn't, I panicked. I didn't know what I was doing." I listened patiently because listening didn't cost me anything anymore. When she finished, she looked up with wet eyes. "Say something," she begged. "Please, anything." I took a breath. Then I said the simplest truth I had. "I did fight for you," I told her. "For years, quietly, in ways you didn't notice because they weren't dramatic." I paused. "But you didn't just leave. You tried to hurt me on your way out. You confessed like it was a weapon. Naomi's face crumpled. I didn't mean… You did, I said gently. And I believe people when they show me who they are. She shook her head fast. Please, I'll do therapy. Miles, we had plans. We had plans, I agreed. But you chose a different story. And now you want me to patch the ending because the middle got messy. Her shoulders sagged. He's gone, she whispered. I nodded as if she'd mentioned the weather. I figured. Naomi's eyes widened. You knew. I knew how it usually goes, I said. Fantasies don't stick around when consequences show up. She took a step toward me, desperation raw now. So that's it? After 9 years, you're just… cold? I shook my head once. I'm not cold, I said. I'm calm. There's a difference. Naomi's lips parted, searching for a new attack, a new plea, any button that still worked. But I had already removed the wiring. I don't hate you, I said again. I just don't live in that chapter anymore. Her tears fell silently. For a long moment, she looked like someone who had finally realized the door was not locked. She had simply walked away from it and the building had been sold. I turned toward the elevator. Miles, she choked. I glanced back once. Sign what's left, I said. Finish clean, then build your life for real. The elevator chimed. I stepped inside and faced forward. The doors closed gently, sealing me into a quiet box of rising floors. When I reached my unit, sunlight poured through the windows. I set the groceries down, poured coffee, and stood on the balcony. Below, the city moved like it always had. Indifferent, alive, full of people making choices. My phone buzzed with a message from Kendra. Final signatures received. Judgment entered next Friday. Congratulations. You're free. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt light, like I had been carrying a heavy backpack for years without realizing it, and someone had finally unclipped it. That evening, I met a friend at a small jazz bar near the river. Not to celebrate, just to exist. A woman at the next table laughed, bright and unforced. She caught my eye and smiled. Nothing flirtatious, nothing strategic, just human. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled back without thinking. Because the real ending wasn't Naomi's collapse or Theo's disappearance or some poetic karmic punchline. The real ending was quiet. A quiet apartment, a quiet morning, a quiet mind, and the understanding that sometimes the strongest move isn't revenge. It's refusing to perform pain for someone who doesn't deserve the show. Some people confess to be forgiven. Others confess to feel powerful. Either way, the most dangerous response is the same: silence, followed by action. The week before the judgment date, Naomi made one final attempt. Not in person, not through a friend, but through the oldest channel of all: nostalgia. A handwritten note appeared in my mailbox. No return address, no perfume, just paper and ink, like she wanted to prove she could be simple now. Miles, I keep replaying that night. The way I said it. The way I wanted you to hurt. I don't know who I was trying to impress. Maybe myself. I don't expect you to come back. I don't deserve that. But I needed you to know I finally understand what you were giving me all those years. I called it boring because it didn't sparkle. It was safety. It was devotion. And I threw it away for adrenaline. I'm sorry. And I read it once. Then I folded it neatly and placed it in the same drawer as the separation papers, right behind the documents I'd never need again. Not as a trophy, not as a reminder, as evidence of a lesson learned too late. On Friday, after the judgment was entered, I did something small and private. I drove to the coast, 2 hours of open highway, and ate fish tacos from a stand that had plastic chairs and a view of gray-blue water. The wind was cold enough to sting. I loved it. My phone stayed face down on the table. No doom scrolling. No checking to see if Naomi posted a quote about resilience. No wondering if Theo had come crawling back. None of it mattered. A gull landed near my chair, bold and ridiculous, staring at my food like it owned the world. I laughed, out loud, genuinely, and the sound startled me. It had been a long time since laughter came without tension attached. When I rode back, the sunset stretched across the highway like molten copper. I realized I wasn't thinking about Naomi at all. Not as an enemy, not as a tragedy, not even as a memory I needed to scrub away, just nothing. And that nothing wasn't emptiness. It was space. Room for a life that didn't require constant defense. The next morning, I woke up early, made coffee, and opened every window in the condo. Air moved through the rooms like a blessing. I stood in the middle of the living room and felt something I'd forgotten existed. Simple, unearned peace. That's what people don't tell you about leaving. The quiet isn't the absence of love. It's the absence of fear.